The unexpected discovery, Lyra's heart raced as her boots crunched against the thick, wet ground of the alien planet. The sky above her was a swirling mass of purple clouds, and the air smelled of something both strange and familiar. She was part of a small exploration crew sent to this uncharted world, but things were not going as planned. The ship had crashed, and now they were stranded in a place no one knew. Her mind was racing with worry for her crew members. They had only just begun to explore the planet when they lost contact with their ship. It had been days since they were last in touch, and their food and water supply was running out fast. They were searching for any signs of life or survivors, but so far, there had been nothing. Suddenly, a sound caught Lyra's attention. It was faint but unmistakable, a low groan. She froze, ears straining. She stepped forward cautiously, moving through the dense jungle underbrush when she saw it. A human figure, half buried in the wreckage of a fallen ship. Lyra approached carefully, her heart pounding in her chest. This was not what she had expected. Humans? Here? She had never seen one in person before, but the reports said they were. A dangerous species, resilient, but unpredictable. The man was unconscious, his face pale and covered in dirt. His clothes were torn, and his breathing was shallow. Lyra quickly knelt beside him, scanning his body for injuries. His leg was twisted at an odd angle, and his hands were bruised. But the most alarming thing was his abdomen. There was a strange swelling there, a bulge that seemed to pulse and move. Lyra's fingers brushed gently against the skin, but it only seemed to make the swelling more pronounced. She quickly took a step back, her mind racing. She had seen injuries before, but this was unlike anything she had encountered. It was as if something inside him was reacting to the environment. The swelling was not natural. It looked like it was alive. Her first instinct was to help. Lyra was trained in medical care for her people, but she had no idea how human biology worked. She had heard that humans were quite different from her species, but she didn't have time to waste. She needed to act quickly. Lyra carefully examined her medical kit, pulling out a small scanner. She ran it over his body, hoping to find some answers. The scanner beeped in confusion, unable to identify the cause of the swelling. Lyra frowned. This was not going to be easy. She looked down at the man, his face still twisted in pain. Her mind raced. She could try some of the treatments from her home world, but she wasn't sure they would work on a human. She hesitated, looking down at him. He was a survivor. That meant something. Without another thought, Lyra gently lifted his body, placing him on a flat surface. She worked quickly, using the tools in her kit to stabilize his broken leg and apply a compress to his wounds. But the swelling on his abdomen was her biggest concern. She ran her fingers over the strange bulge again, hoping for some clue. As she touched it, the swelling seemed to shift, causing the man to moan softly. Lyra pulled her hand back, her heart racing. What was happening to him? Lyra bit her lip, trying to calm herself. She wasn't used to this kind of uncertainty. She was trained to heal, to fix problems, but nothing she had learned could prepare her for this. Her hands shook slightly as she continued to assess him. The swelling seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as if something inside him was alive. Lyra's mind raced, trying to come up with a solution. She looked back at the wreckage of the ship. It was clear the humans' crew had tried to survive here, but had failed. How had they ended up here? What had happened to their ship? Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden movement. The man's eyelids fluttered, and he slowly opened his eyes. His gaze locked onto hers, filled with confusion and pain. Where am I? He rasped, his voice hoarse from dehydration. Lyra didn't answer immediately. She was too focused on the swelling. You've been hurt, she said softly, unsure of how to explain it to him. There's something inside you that's causing this. I'm not sure what it is. The man blinked, trying to sit up, but Lyra gently pushed him back down. No, you need to stay still, she said firmly. He winced in pain but didn't argue. I was with my crew, he mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. But we were attacked. There was something in the jungle. Something I don't remember. Lyra's heart sank. He was in shock and his words were incoherent. But there was no time to dwell on that. The swelling was growing larger, and it was clear that whatever it wasn't something she could fix with her standard methods. She felt a pang of fear. This was unlike anything she had encountered before. She needed answers and fast. Lyra turned to her medical kit again, trying to find anything that could help, but she knew deep down that nothing she had would be enough. The human's body was reacting in ways that didn't make sense. His breathing became more erratic, and his face contorted in pain. He looked up at her with pleading eyes, desperate for help. "Please," he gasped. I don't want to die here." Lyra took a deep breath. She couldn't let him die, not when she had the power to help him. But what could she do? She wasn't sure her medical knowledge was enough to save him. She didn't even know what this swelling was, let alone how to treat it. She felt a deep sense of helplessness. She had saved countless lives back home, but this was different. This was new. And it was terrifying. But Lyra wasn't one to back down from a challenge. She glanced around the alien jungle, knowing that the answers to this mystery were somewhere out there. She had to find them. For his sake. For the sake of her crew. She could only hope that whatever strange force was affecting this human, she would be able to defeat it. Before it was too late. Escalating problems. Lyra's mind raced as she watched Jake's condition worsen before her eyes. The strange swelling on his abdomen had grown larger, its pulsations becoming more intense with each passing minute. No matter what she tried, nothing seemed to work. She had used all the treatments from her medical kit, but it was as if the swelling was resisting everything she did. She wiped the sweat from her brow, feeling the weight of her failure pressing down on her. She had always been confident in her ability to heal, but this was beyond her. The alien pathogen inside. Jake's body was unlike anything she had ever encountered. Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by a soft groan from Jake. His eyes fluttered open again, and he looked at her with a mix of confusion and fear. His breathing was shallow, and his skin was cold to the touch. How bad is it? He whispered, his voice strained. Lyra didn't answer immediately. She was afraid of the truth. She could see the fear in his eyes, but she wasn't ready to admit that she had no answers for him. Instead, she quickly scanned her medical kit once more, trying to find anything that might help. But all the standard treatments she knew were meant for alien species, not humans. She had no data on how to treat human physiology, especially not when it was reacting to something so foreign. Jake coughed weakly, pulling her attention back to him. "Lyra, please. I don't want to die here." His words were filled with desperation. "I am not ready to go." Lyra bit her lip, feeling the sting of his words deep in her chest. She had never seen a human before, and now she was faced with the possibility of losing him without even knowing what was wrong with him. She had no right to let him die in her care. "I won't let you die," she said firmly, her voice filled with determination. She grabbed his hand, holding it tightly in hers. "I'm going to find a way to fix this. Just hold on." Jake weakly squeezed her hand in return, his gaze softening for a moment. But then his eyes widened in pain as the swelling seemed to pulse again, growing even larger. He gasped, his chest heaving with each breath, as the pain intensified. Lyra quickly placed her hand on his abdomen, but as soon as she did, the swelling seemed to grow even worse. It was as if the alien force inside him was fighting back against her touch. She pulled her hand away, panic rising in her chest. "What is happening to me?" Jake gasped, his voice trembling. "Why is it getting worse? I thought you were going to help me." Lyra's mind was racing. She knew the situation was dire, but there had to be something she could do. She couldn't let him die, Not when she was this close to finding a solution. She just needed more time, but time was running out. The strange, pulsing swelling was now so large that it seemed to be pressing against his ribs. His breath came in ragged gasps, and the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable to watch. Lyra stepped back, feeling a wave of helplessness wash over her. She could feel her heart racing in her chest. She had to do something, but what? She glanced around the wreckage of the ship, hoping for some kind of answer. Her crew was still searching for supplies, but they had no idea where she was. It had been days since they last communicated with each other. They wouldn't be able to help her. She turned back to Jake, her eyes searching his face. He was so weak now, his body trembling with every breath. It was clear that the swelling was doing more than just causing physical pain. It was draining him. Lyra took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She couldn't lose him. Not like this. She looked down at her medical kit one last time, determined to find something that would help. And then she remembered something: the scans. She had done a scan earlier when she first found Jake, but it had come up with no answers. But maybe, just maybe, there was more information in the scan that she missed. Lyra quickly grabbed the scanner again, her hands shaking as she ran it over Jake's body. The device beeped as it began to scan, its soft hum filling the silence of the jungle. This time, the scan returned something. The readings were strange, unlike anything she had ever seen before. There was an unusual chemical reaction happening inside his body. The swelling wasn't just a physical injury. It was a reaction to something inside him. Something alien. Lyra's eyes widened in realization. The swelling wasn't a wound. It was the result of a chemical interaction between Jake's body and the alien pathogen he had been exposed to. This pathogen was attacking his body, and the swelling was the symptom of it. But the question was, why hadn't the pathogen killed him already? Why was it still alive inside him? Jake let out another groan, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra, please. What is it? What's happening to me? Lyra looked down at the scan data in her hands. The answer wasn't clear, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just an ordinary infection. The pathogen inside Jake's body was powerful, too powerful for her to fix with the tools she had. She needed something else. She needed to find a cure. Her eyes flicked back to Jake, his face pale and drawn. His pulse was weak, and the pain was taking its toll on him. She could see it in the way he clutched his chest, the way his body shook with each breath. She couldn't lose him. Not when she was so close to understanding what was happening. I'm not giving up, Lyra whispered to herself, a fierce determination building inside her. I will find a way. I will save you, Jake. She stood up, her mind already racing with possibilities. There had to be something on this planet that could help. She just had to find it. And she would do whatever it took to save him. The truth behind the swelling. Lyra stood still, staring at the scanner in her hands. The readings on the device were unlike anything she had ever seen before. The data it provided was confusing, yet one thing was clear: Jake's body was reacting to something. Something alien, something dangerous. The swelling wasn't just a symptom of an injury. It was the result of an unknown pathogen. But why was it affecting him this way? Why wasn't it killing him already? Jake's body was still trembling beneath her hands, his breathing erratic and shallow. He had slipped in and out of consciousness several times, each time with a look of increasing fear. Every time he woke, his first words were the same: Lyra, please, help me. Each time, Lyra felt her heart break. She could see the pain in his eyes, the desperation that was slowly eating away at his will to fight. But there was no time to waste. She needed answers. She needed a cure. Jake, Lyra whispered, placing a hand on his forehead. I'm going to figure this out, I promise. He nodded weakly, his eyes flicking to the strange bulge in his abdomen that seemed to grow by the hour. It pulsed, and shifted, almost as though it were alive. Lyra had never seen anything like it. It wasn't like any disease she had encountered on her world. It wasn't like any poison either. It was something far worse. She turned away from him for a moment, her mind racing. She had to think. There had to be something. She needed to find a way to stop the pathogen before it took over his body completely. She remembered the other human survivors. What had happened to them? Was this pathogen something they had all encountered? The thought filled her with dread. If this thing was as dangerous as it seemed, what were the chances Jake was the only one left? Lyra shook her head, trying to push the thoughts aside. She couldn't afford to think like that now. Jake was the one who needed her. He was the one she could help. She examined the medical scanner once more, hoping for a breakthrough. But the data remained confusing. There was no sign of infection spreading throughout his body, yet the swelling seemed to grow stronger. It was almost as if something was feeding on his energy, using him as a host. She looked around the wreckage of the ship, hoping for some clue. Maybe something from the crash could help. Her eyes fell on a small compartment, half hidden under the wreckage. She moved quickly toward it, carefully pulling away the twisted metal. Inside, she found a set of old human supplies, left behind by the other survivors. She pulled out a few containers, inspecting each one. There were medications, bandages, and a few medical tools, but nothing that could help her with the pathogen inside Jake's body. But then, her eyes landed on something that caught her attention. A small vial, labeled with a symbol she didn't recognize. She took the vial carefully in her hands, inspecting it. The contents inside shimmered with a strange, glowing blue liquid. It looked harmless enough, but she had no idea what it was. Could this be some kind of antidote? Lyra hesitated for a moment, looking back at Jake. He was still unconscious, his face pale, but his breathing had slowed a little. He was still alive, but how long could he hold on? She made up her mind. She would have to try. She couldn't let him die without doing everything in her power to save him. She uncorked the vial and held it up to the light. The liquid inside seemed to pulse in response to the light, as though it were alive. Lyra swallowed nervously before carefully administering a small amount into Jake's mouth. She was unsure if it would work, but there was no other choice. She had to try something. Jake's body shifted slightly, his hand twitching. Then, slowly, he opened his eyes. His gaze flickered as if he were struggling to wake. His eyes locked onto Lyra's face, confusion clouding his features. What did you do?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I gave you something." Lyra replied softly. "I don't know what it is, but it might help." Jake's eyes darted down to his abdomen. The swelling had stopped growing, but it hadn't shrunk either. For a moment, there was silence between them. Then, to Lyra's relief, he let out a long breath and closed his eyes. "I feel better," he muttered, his voice weaker but more coherent. "Not much, but something." Lyra let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. This was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. She had bought them more time. She couldn't afford to waste it. As Jake drifted in and out of consciousness, Lyra stayed by his side, watching for any signs that the swelling was getting worse again. She couldn't help but wonder what exactly she had just given him. What was the glowing liquid? What did it do to his body? She needed answers, and she needed them fast. The planet was a mystery in itself, full of unknowns. But Jake had been here, and maybe he knew something. He had to. Lyra reached over to the wreckage and pulled out the small recorder she found earlier. She needed to hear Jake's story. She needed to know more about what had happened to his crew, what had caused the crash, and what the creature in the jungle might be. The recorder clicked to life, and Jake's voice crackled through. His voice sounded weak, but there was an urgency to it. "We didn't expect the attack. It came from nowhere. Something alien." Jake's voice trembled with the memory. "It was fast, strong. We didn't have time to react." Lyra's pulse quickened. An alien attack. That was the key. The pathogen inside Jake's body had to be linked to whatever had attacked his crew. It was a deadly combination. She had to figure out what it was and how to stop it before it claimed more lives. Jake's voice continued to play through the recorder, his words broken and painful. Before I blacked out, I saw it. It was watching us ... waiting. I don't know what it wanted, but it was the last thing I saw before the darkness took over. Lyra felt her stomach drop. Whatever had attacked Jake's crew, it was not something she could easily fight. It was a new kind of threat, something far more dangerous than anything she had encountered before. And now, it was up to her to stop it. The solution lies within. Humanity. Lyra felt a weight settle on her chest as she listened to the rest of Jake's message. The creature, the one that had attacked his crew, was still out there somewhere, watching, waiting. And whatever had happened to Jake's body, it was just the beginning of something much bigger. She needed to figure out what was happening, and fast. The strange glowing liquid had given Jake a small boost, but it wasn't enough. The swelling had stopped growing, but it hadn't shrunk. It was clear that Lyra needed more answers, and there was only one way to get them through Jake. She took a deep breath, looking down at the unconscious human. His condition was improving, but only slightly. He needed more time to recover, but time was something they didn't have. She stood up, pacing around the wreckage of the ship. Her mind was racing. If this alien pathogen was linked to the creature Jake had seen, then the creature itself must hold the key. Lyra had to find it, learn more about it, and hopefully find a way to stop it. But that meant leaving Jake alone. And she wasn't sure if that was something she could do. With a final glance at Jake, Lyra grabbed her weapon and medical supplies. She wasn't sure where to start, but the jungle outside the wreckage held answers. She could feel it. The planet was alive with secrets, and she was determined to uncover them. As Lyra stepped outside, the air hit her like a cold wave. The once tropical jungle had become even more ominous in the short time she had been in the wreck. The trees loomed overhead like ancient sentinels, and the air buzzed with the sound of unseen creatures. Lyra could feel the tension, the sense of being watched. She knew that if she didn't find the creature soon, Jake wouldn't survive. His condition was worsening, and every moment she delayed could be his last. But she also knew that rushing in without a plan could be fatal. Lyra took a deep breath and focused on the task at hand. She needed to find the creature, learn its weaknesses, and return to Jake before it was too late. She glanced at the nearby trees, knowing the creature could be anywhere. Waiting, her instincts kicked in as she moved quietly through the jungle. She used the cover of the trees to hide her movements, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of the creature. She wasn't sure what it looked like, but she knew it was fast, deadly, and far smarter than anything she had ever encountered. It was unlike anything her species had faced before, and it terrified her. Hours passed, and Lyra grew more frustrated. She had seen no signs of the creature, no tracks or clues that could point her in the right direction. But then, just as she was about to turn back, she heard it, a low guttural growl that echoed through the jungle. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. It was close. The creature was close. Lyra immediately dropped to the ground, her body hidden in the shadows. She knew that if she was spotted, there would be no chance of survival. She waited, her breath shallow. As the growl grew louder. From the corner of her eye, Lyra saw movement. A dark shape darted through the underbrush, so fast that it was almost a blur. She barely had time to react before the creature appeared in front of her. It was massive, easily the size of a large predator back home. Its body was sleek and black, with long limbs and claws that glinted in the dim light. But what caught Lyra's attention was its eyes. They were bright, yellow, and seemed to glow with intelligence. It was watching her. Lyra held her breath, her mind racing. The creature was intelligent, but it wasn't making any moves to attack. It was waiting. Waiting for her to make a mistake. She knew she couldn't defeat it in a direct fight. Her only chance was to outsmart it, to use its intelligence against it. She took a slow, steady breath, focusing her thoughts on the creature in front of her. It seemed to be sizing her up, its eyes never leaving hers. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. She had no idea what the creature wanted, but she could feel its presence in every fiber of her being. It was studying her, learning her movements, waiting for her to make a mistake. In that moment, Lyra realized something. This creature was not just a mindless predator. It was a force of nature, a being with a purpose, and that purpose had something to do with Jake's condition. She had to find a way to communicate with it, to understand its motives. With a deep breath, Lyra stood up slowly, making sure not to make any sudden movements. The creature's eyes followed her every step, but it didn't attack. It was as if it was waiting for her to make the first move. Lyra took a step forward, then another, testing the creature's reaction. To her surprise, it didn't move. It just watched her, its yellow eyes locked on hers. Lyra stopped in her tracks, realizing that she had to be careful. The creature was not an enemy in the traditional sense. It wasn't here to kill her. It was here for something else, something she needed to understand. She had to know why it was so interested in the humans, why it had attacked Jake's crew, and infected him with that strange pathogen. She took one more step, this time closer to the creature. It didn't flinch, didn't make a move. Lyra's heart raced in her chest. She had never been this close to something so dangerous before, yet she felt no fear. Instead, there was a sense of curiosity, a feeling that the creature was trying to tell her something. Without warning, the creature suddenly lunged forward, faster than she could react. Lyra instinctively raised her weapon, but before she could fire, the creature stopped just inches from her face. It cocked its head as if it was studying her once again. And then, in an instant, it was gone, vanishing back into the jungle without a trace. Lyra stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She had come face to face with the creature, and, though it had not attacked her, she knew it was only a matter of time before it did. The pathogen inside Jake's body had to be connected to this creature. And now Lyra knew what she had to do. She needed to return to Jake. She had seen enough to understand the creature's intelligence, and she was convinced it was not just a mindless beast. She had to figure out how to use that knowledge to help Jake. If she could understand the creature's motives, maybe she could find a way to stop it from spreading the pathogen. A new beginning. Lyra's heart raced as she made her way back to the wreckage, her mind filled with questions. What had she learned from the creature? What did it want? And more importantly, what did it have to do with Jake's condition? She felt as if she was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle, but there was no time to waste. Jake needed her, and every second counted. As she approached the wreckage, she could see Jake's figure through the broken pieces of the ship. His body was still weak, but the strange swelling on his abdomen had not grown worse since she had given him the mysterious blue liquid. The swelling was still there, but now it seemed to pulse with a strange rhythm, as if it had its own heartbeat. Lyra stepped inside, her eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. The jungle outside still felt ominous, but right now her only focus was Jake. She walked over to him, kneeling by his side, her heart sinking as she saw the exhaustion on his face. He was barely conscious, his breathing shallow. "Jake?" Lyra whispered softly, gently placing a hand on his arm. "Jake, can you hear me?" He opened his eyes slowly, looking up at her with a weak smile. "Lyra, you came back." "Of course I did," she replied, her voice steady but filled with concern. "How are you feeling?" He winced slightly, his hand instinctively going to his abdomen. "Better, but it still hurts. It's like something's pulling at me from the inside. I don't know how much longer I can last." Lyra's heart broke at the sound of his voice. She hated seeing him like this, so vulnerable, so fragile. She had promised him that she wouldn't let him die, and she wasn't going to break that promise. But how could she save him when she had no idea what was causing this? What was the creature in the jungle, and how did it connect to the strange pathogen inside Jake? "I'm going to fix this," Lyra said, her voice firm. "I'm not giving up on you." Jake nodded weakly, his eyes closing again. Lyra reached over to the medical kit, looking through it one last time. She had used everything she could think. But nothing seemed to work. The strange pathogen inside Jake's body was resistant to everything she had tried. But then, a thought hit her: the creature. The pathogen had to be connected to it. Lyra had seen the creature's intelligence. It wasn't just attacking for the sake of it. It was watching, waiting. And maybe, just maybe, it had a reason for infecting Jake's crew. Maybe there was a way to communicate with it, to understand why it was doing this. She stood up quickly, her mind racing. She couldn't do this alone. She needed more help. She needed the creature's help. Lyra took a deep breath, making a decision. She wasn't going to let Jake suffer any longer. She had already seen what the creature could do, but now she had to understand it. She had to communicate with it. To get the answers they both needed, she grabbed her weapon, securing it at her side, and then turned back to Jake. He was still unconscious, but his breathing was steady. She couldn't leave him like this, but she had no other choice. She needed to face the creature again, and this time, she was going to be ready. Lyra made her way back into the jungle, her eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. She knew the creature was close. It was always watching. But now she wasn't afraid. She had learned something crucial. The creature wasn't just an enemy. It was a puzzle, and it held the key to saving Jake. As she moved deeper into the jungle, Lyra's thoughts raced. She had no idea what she would say to the creature, but she knew she had to try. It had to be more than just a mindless beast. She had seen the intelligence in its eyes, the way it had studied her, waiting for her to make a move. If she could understand its motives, maybe she could find a way to stop the pathogen from spreading. The jungle grew darker as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ground. Lyra slowed her pace, listening intently for any sounds. The air felt heavy, charged with energy. She could sense that the creature was near. Suddenly, there was a rustling in the bushes ahead. Lyra froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached for her weapon, but then she heard the low growl. It was the creature, and it was close. Too close. She took a deep breath, stepping forward cautiously. She didn't want to fight it, not yet. She needed answers, and she was going to get them, no matter what. Lyra stepped into the clearing, her eyes scanning the area. There, standing in the shadows, was the creature. It was just as she remembered, large, sleek, and powerful, with those glowing yellow eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. It didn't move as she approached. It just watched her, its gaze intense. Lyra held her breath, taking a step closer. The creature didn't seem hostile. It wasn't attacking, but it was waiting. It was waiting for her to make the first move. "I need your help," Lyra said quietly, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "I don't understand why you're doing this. What do you want from Jake? Why are you infecting him with that pathogen?" For a moment, the creature remained still. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. Was it even capable of understanding her? Then, to her surprise, the creature stepped forward, its eyes never leaving hers. It stopped just inches away, and for the first time, Lyra felt the weight of its presence. It wasn't just a predator, it was something more. The creature let out a low growl, but this time, it wasn't threatening. It seemed almost sad. Lyra's eyes widened. She wasn't sure what this meant, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't alone in this. The creature was connected to Jake's fate, and she was going to find a way to make it right.